It's a real honor to be joining this gathering, and I'd like to thank Professor Shin for the invitation to join you this afternoon. My talk will be touching on some themes that Shin introduced today, of organization, of design, of technology, and of the human condition and this aspiration for dreams and for change. So hopefully you'll start seeing these connections and connecting back to the work you do in your organizations and institutions. I have the great privilege to share a mentor with Professor Shin, Dr. Buchanan, as well as Sabine, and so you'll also see some commonalities there. My background is not as a designer. I'm really someone who was formed in the humanities, and then I did a doctoral work in management with a focus on social innovation and design. So what I study these days and teach is really looking at the intersections of design, social innovation, and organizations. And for several years I've had the opportunity to be embedded as a researcher in an organization that is all about dreams and the welfare of children, and that is UNICEF. So I'll be talking about UNICEF a little bit today. So hopefully this clicker works. There. Okay, so these days I'm a professor in New York City at the New School. Should I be clicking this in one way? And it goes up, back and forth. No? Doesn't seem to want to go past the second slide. Technology sometimes is not our friend. No? Maybe somebody can come here and give me another clicker. This is... Okay. Take the one down. Okay. So, my university is in the heart of Manhattan, and it's a unique institution that I joined about a year ago after working in California for almost 20 years in design innovation. Because we're a university with 5 schools, and it is unique in that half of our university, 10,000 students, half of them, 5,500, are artists and designers, and they're studying Parsons School of Design, where I teach and I do research. As you can see, it's a very international institution, and a very diverse one. And we're very proud to have the #1 ranking in design in the United States, and the #2 ranking in the world to study design. This is our mission statement at Parsons New School. This idea that we're really educating individuals to make change in society. We're very committed to our social justice mission, and we're very committed to thinking about design not in its own silo, but really in dialogue with the social sciences, with philosophy, with anthropology, with psychology, with what we can learn from the human condition, and in turn what we can think of design informing these disciplines. And it's a fantastic place to be teaching and doing research and being in dialogue with the next generation of designers, because we are at a moment for design as a field of knowledge that is, I would say, unique in that we are experiencing a maturing of the field, and I think the examples that Shin showed are demonstrative of that new growth of our understanding of the power of design to make change and to help us fulfill our dreams. Specifically, what I study is how design acts in organizations that are in the public sector, in government and non-governmental organizations, and in large international development organizations like UNICEF. And these are more emerging practices of design. It's only in the last decade or so that we have started seeing designers being hired in these organizations at more strategic levels, really contributing to decision-making. So, for me, what I see in this research is that design is on the exponential rise. We're seeing more widespread types of designs. The boundaries of design are more porous. It's no longer about the artifacts or specific disciplines of design. Design is becoming more self-reflexive and self-aware and reflexive. In our institution, we really teach our students to be very critical of what they are making, the decisions they're making, how they might impact value chains, how they have to be aware of the unintended consequences of their decisions. And the territories of design have been altered in that designers now are really collaborating with other colleagues across disciplines to have an impact in environments and interactions and systems that are much more abstract and tangible. And it's important, I think, to think about different ways of defining design. There are many definitions of design. The one that is up on the screen is again from our mentor, Dr. Buchanan. And it's one that I use a lot in my research and in my work, because it gets to the human quality, the humanistic quality, the fundamental contribution that designers make when you engage them in a conversation, when you engage them in your corporation, in your organization. They are able to be the connectors that might really point to questions of empathy, to questions of human principles and human value. And it's very important to have the designer in the room, to have the designer in these conversations, so that the technologies, the products, and the innovations that you are part of will have that human being centrally in the equation of your work. It's also an interesting time for design, and it's an interesting time for the field, because in the wider context that we're living in, we are experiencing rapid change. One of the interesting problems we have is that we're living in a world of organizations that have been designed in the 19th century, and very often they're no longer adequate for the lifestyles and the changes we need to make. And this causes anxiety and problems. We're also in a world of networks. Organizations and governments are much more flat and horizontal, and that demands another kind of leadership, another kind of governance than many of the managerial models in organizations, the command and control models that we have traditionally put in place after the post-industrial world. So we're in need for new ways of leading, of making decisions, and these demand of us more agile leaders. And designers, again, are trained and educated to doing this well. This is work from Carl Schwab in the World Economic Forum, who talks about the fourth industrial revolution. Really time of living in the cloud with our technology. It's a shift in landscape for practitioners and for companies. We're going from profit to purpose, from hierarchical decisions to horizontal networks, from controlling to empowering. Customers want to have a decision, from planning to experimentation, and from privacy to transparency. And these big shifts in how we lead and how we think about organizations are really an invitation for designers to contribute. These mega changes are many, and in the context of my research at UNICEF and at the UN, they have to do with these very large humanitarian issues. Migration, climate change, pandemics, all are interrelated in the world we live in, and they affect us all. So specifically, this is research that I'm finishing after 2 years of interviews and data collection at UNICEF. This is one of the big questions I'm asking in this study. What is the role of design in innovation at UNICEF? I started doing this work in 2013, and it's very interesting because of the mandate of the organization, UNICEF. And it is grounded in a division of innovation at UNICEF. And UNICEF is not the only organization to be championing innovation in the UN system. There's a whole network, and many different agencies within the UN are doing that. But they've really been doing it in a very purposeful way. And what is unique about them is that they're really interrogating the larger blueprint of development that the UN has. You might have seen these, the Sustainable Development Goals, this idea that by 2030, we really have to think about all these issues. And when you see them on the screen, you quickly realize these are wicked problems, right? In other words, if we tell they're interdependent, and we're not going to solve them by managing from the top down. We have to come up with new ways. And for UNICEF innovation, these new ways have to do with principles. And you can see from these principles that have been adapted widely in the UN system, they're very connected to principles of design. Designing with the user, thinking about the ecosystem, being collaborative, so forth and so on. So it's a great organization because they are employing designers, but they're also deploying what I call is a design attitude in how they think about innovation and change. And I've been doing a lot of research around that design attitude concept in the last few years. The study that I wanted to very quickly show you some examples of has to do with a venture fund. So this is a model out of Silicon Valley, private sector model, where the team at UNICEF has invested in frontier technologies and entrepreneurs in the private sector and asking them to bring their ideas with open source technology to benefit the most vulnerable children around the world. So these are the kinds of projects that I'm looking at from entrepreneurs from around the world. And, you know, they range from VR to blockchain to drones and machine learning. And it's exciting because it's really about very big industries at scale that can really meet the needs of a lot of children around the world. It's the idea of connecting private sector startups with platforms and really grow in an organization that has those ambitions. It's really looking at exponential growth. And the investment is a collective pool of funding. It's not a lot of money, right? It's about less than $15 million, very little money in the scale of financial investment, but it's catalytic investment. So it's the first time that private entrepreneurs are brought in, and the kinds of projects they have and companies they're starting can really then attract much bigger financing and bigger networks within the system that UNICEF has. These are the 3 areas of investment of these technologies: products for youth under 25, real-time information, real-time data, has a lot of impact on the UN, and infrastructure. And some of the companies that have been funded through this fund, you know, range really, you can see them on the right, very much in the global south, in different countries where UNICEF is active, and are really doing very exciting work. So it might be deploying blockchain technology for schools in South Africa and thinking about cryptocurrency. It might be about mobile technology, phones, to get vulnerable situations and children connected using facial recognition, etc., etc. So, why is this exciting? Again, because of the issues that UNICEF and the UN are trying to respond to. The scale of these issues is so large, so the promise and the potential that these technologies are inviting is very exciting. And if you look at the statistics, of course, they're very dire, right? We're seeing that 55 million children have been displaced just in the last few crises of refugees that we've been living. Urbanization, you know, the projections of people living in cities and again being displaced from their homes and their environments and their families is again a very huge, immense scale. Climate change is also affecting the most vulnerable children around the world. The supply chains and pandemics are rapidly disrupting many systems when they hit. When you think about the Ebola pandemic in the last few years. So these are questions that don't have simple answers, and again, the rate of technology's promise is very attractive. But as you know, the question becomes in the research I'm doing, where is the role of design in these innovations, and how does design participate in these kinds of companies and questions? And before I address that, a couple more examples that I can illustrate this promise of this technology. So one of the big projects UNICEF takes on when they go after a crisis, when they go to vulnerable regions of the world, is to assess nutrition in young children. And this is the typical way that gets done. A very simple measurement of the circumference of a child's arm. Now, machine learning with this company that was founded by private entrepreneurs in Kenya is allowing us to very quickly, through facial recognition, diagnose malnutrition in children in just a few seconds. So suddenly the human capital and the time that it took to do this procedure is completely changed. So that's one example. Another example, of course, has to do with mobile technologies that will allow us to address issues such as identity. In a lot of crises, it's very hard to track children's safety. And again, through some of the new companies being funded through this fund, the rapid rate of doing that has been accelerated. Blockchain is a very interesting application in the UNICEF context because it brings about opportunities for transparency and accountability across different parts of the world and in areas of the world where there might be a lot of corruption. So it's bringing a new level of accountability to the system. And to the question again of where is this sitting within the ecosystem of an organization like the United Nations, this question of new technologies and frontier technologies, the work of this team is having a really important impact. So this is a report that was just issued by the Secretary General of the United Nations last September that is putting in place a new agenda and a new manifesto of how the United Nations is going to be integrating new technologies into their day-to-day work. And it's exciting because for an organization like the United Nations, the importance of thinking about the good but also the bad around technology becomes really important. So the ethical dimensions of putting together these technologies and deploying them and making sure that they're meeting everyone equally and that they're not introducing unintended consequences. And some of those questions that now at the policy level for the organization are being put forth in a report like that have been emerging from my research after talking for 2 years to staff and entrepreneurs and different team members of the simulation unit at UNICEF. And some of the preliminary findings of that study, which are not published yet, point to some interesting tensions. One of them is what happens when you insert new ways of collaborating between the private sector and companies with a very large bureaucratic public sector organization. How do you design those relationships? How do you design those partnerships so that there is value on both ends that gets scaled? That's an important question. And what does that look like in terms of design? And what does that look like in terms of innovation? So many insights around those areas. And insights around this question of risk, right? We like to talk in design about prototyping and iterating. Those are some of our words. We like to talk about failing fast, because we believe that failing is a way of learning, and it's in that learning that comes from mistakes that we can innovate and come up with new ways of addressing issues. This is, of course, very difficult to do in an organization when failing might be, the consequences of failing might be not having children vaccinated and having children die from an experiment that you run. So, important questions around that, organizational culture. Lots of questions around the promises, but also the perils, the dangers of new technologies when the proper questions of ethics are not asked. And then finally, a whole set of insights around design. Design as a cognitive capability that can really transform organizations and how that is manifested in this very large institution. And one of those insights is revolving around the gap that I see in this research, that we see in many organizations when we're fast advancing technology. And it's a gap between the rate of change that technology is inviting versus how we are falling behind in terms of legislation and regulation to also understand the social and the cultural impact of these technology changes. What does that do to the human beings that are part of that transaction? Okay, there were a couple more slides. Yeah, so I've been talking about the ethical dimensions. A lot of the technologies and the companies that are invited in this fund are not necessarily always local. And so the unique realities of the young girl in Sierra Leone are not always being considered in the deployment of these technologies. And this is something we have to watch out. And this is something, again, where designers and design have a lot to contribute from our field research perspective. I wanted to finish this talk by leaving you with the words of an important philosopher who was one of the architects of the Human Rights Declaration of the United Nations, and a philosopher all of us who studied what David Buchanan had to study closely and keep using. He's an American philosopher who was very active in the 50s, and he was a disciple of John Dewey, another philosopher in the US who has really been a master in having us think about education and learning and innovation. And he really talks about design as a field of knowledge, being really able to be a catalyst for change, a catalyst for dreams, to use Shin's invitation, because it invites us to be free in action. It invites us to be responsible in society, how we relate as human beings, and wise in how we pursue new knowledge. And I think his words resonate with the conversation we will have over these 3 days. It's really been my privilege to join you this afternoon. Thank you very much.